Hello, and welcome to another entrancing Stan the History Man episode. I'm your host, Dr. Stanley Sandler. Tonight, I want to talk about why historical background to Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. I think the first thing we have to realize is that everybody seems to have invaded Russia at one time or another. Even the Swedes back in the 17th century got pretty far into Russia, but also the Brits, the French, the Canadians, the Japanese, all at one time or another were invaded Russia. In fact, many invaded right after World War I, 1918, 1920, 1922. Allied forces went into Russia and were trying to, in a sense, overthrow the Bolshevik government. One of the reasons why Russia was invaded so often was that the land between, well, even Eastern Germany through Poland, through Ukraine to Russia is relatively flat. I mean, there are rivers and there are hills there, but not major barriers. So invading is not a major operation. I mean, a war goes on, they fight back, but still, remember, the French got all the way, they got to Moscow, all right? And in a sense, General Winter defeated them. And the Germans in 1941 got to the very gates of Moscow. They could see it through high powered telescopes or binoculars. But again, basically, General Winter defeated them. So we've got to remember that Russia has really a paranoid, I don't think it's too strong to say that, a paranoid feeling about being invaded by other people, even nice guys like the Canadians and the Brits and the Americans, all right, not just the Germans. Um, so the idea of bringing NATO up to the borders of Russia would be intolerable to Putin and to any Russian nationalist. The And of course, you have to remember that Ukraine is very anti-Russian. Most of it, Western Ukraine, is very anti-Russian, and that's understandable because Russia ruled them, and the Russians ruled pretty brutally. Under the czars, whatever you got out of line, you'd wind up in Siberia. So it's then also probably the most vivid memory, which is still not out of living memory, is the Holodomor. That is what the Ukrainians call the mass famine in Ukraine. Stalin had this crazy idea, and almost all communists fail in agriculture. So Stalin had this idea of collectivizing agriculture, factories in the fields, and you'd have all these collective farms, the peasants happily working together with each other, and not for selfish personal motives, of course, but for the glorious Soviet motherland and then for their fellow people. And but what he didn't realize, I guess he realized, didn't care, is that peasants are desperately attached to their land. That is the one thing. This is my land, and I'm not going to give it up for the glorious motherland or anything else. This is my land and for my family. And that's the only wealth they have. But Stalin said, you're going to collectivize, one of these giant collective farms run by thousands, hundreds of thousands of tractors, all mechanized, you see. And the peasants resisted that. And so Stalin went in there the way Stalin and the communists do and said, you're going to do this or else. And so the peasants' farms were destroyed. The peasants themselves often shipped off to Siberia. And the Soviets said, well, we are only concentrating on the kulaks, the wealthy peasants. That is, a peasant has more than one cow. Two cows, you're off to Siberia. And what happened from all of this was, as they say, the Russians, the communists have never been able really to work agriculture very well. In Ethiopia, 20 million Chinese died. This is late as the 1950s, okay? Oh, got a problem here. Talk to you later.